Spotify has recently shared that its most experienced developers haven't written a line of code since December. It's currently February. The head of Claude Code, the creator who actually built the tool himself and ships PR requests at 10 times the rate that he did before, has also shared that he hasn't written a line of code in months. And yet, still, I see everywhere a ton of negative feedback about AI slop. But it's generally targeted at basically resisting leveraging AI for software development when it comes to almost anything. And from someone who's been a software engineer for nearing 20 years at this point, I need to tell you why that is such a massive mistake. If we don't adapt and leverage this technology where it makes sense, we will be disrupted. And I don't want that to happen to you. So let's talk more about this topic and what it means for bootstrap SaaS founders like you and me. If you don't know me, my name is Sean Boyce, and I spent years building successful SaaS businesses. And now I'm sharing those lessons learned with you to hopefully increase your chances of designing and building the SaaS business of your dreams. Let's review Boris's case study in greater detail to see how he's leveraging AI. So as I mentioned previously, he specifically says that he hasn't written any code by hand in months, not even for small changes, which is crazy. And obviously, based on the rest of the information that you can see here, the productivity gains are dramatic. Being able to ship nearly 50 pull requests in 2 days, that kind of productivity just wasn't possible before we had access to AI. So he's not writing code by hand, but I also want you to take away what he's sharing about the experience. He's saying that this process has never been more enjoyable for him because he can automate away a lot of the boring, admin, monotonous elements of writing code manually. Can leverage AI for that, and you can focus more on strategy and making a greater impact, so the experience is better. This has affected everything up to and including Anthropic's hiring practices. They're no longer looking for those specialists who know the technology and those languages inside and out. They're looking for generalists who can get the most out of the LLMs and leveraging AI to write code. On a recent earnings call, the CEO of Spotify said that even their most experienced developers haven't written any code by hand in months. They have been making significant productivity gains by leveraging AI in this way, and you can see some of that detail here. Now, at the same time, they've developed an internal process for which I love the name. It's called Honk, and basically what it is they've enabled their technical teams to be able to both squash bugs and ship new features on their commute to the office or from the office directly from their phones. Now, that was something that wasn't even possible years ago before we had access to technology like this. So these companies are making significant gains by leveraging it more extensively. Look, guys, the takeaway here is that these aren't necessarily just startups testing new tools. This is the creator of the tools themselves, as well as large-scale software companies with greater than 750 million daily active users using this technology almost exclusively at this point to ship production code at scale. I'm seeing the resistance to AI for coding purposes basically everywhere. Now, in addition to successfully shipping SaaS products myself over however many years at this point, I also have done a ton of consulting work to companies who need help with their software projects, anywhere from product strategy all the way to and through product development. And what I'm here to tell you is that I've worked basically anywhere from government-backed entities that need to manage software projects all the way to and through Silicon Valley startups. And I'm seeing this resistance across the board. And look, I want you to know that I get it, right? For the longest time, most of our work has led to a lot of the disruption that's happened in other industries. And right now, that's changing our industry pretty significantly and very, very quickly. So it is an unsettling time to better understand, right? This has been disrupted so many times at this point. Where does it all wind up? So I get that. So I acknowledge that the discomfort is real, but I need to make sure that it doesn't mean that you're resisting or just outright rejecting the technology and that you're failing to adapt, because that would be a huge mistake. I want to share with you a little bit more about my technical background so you know where I'm coming from and where I've been. So I'm a degreed computer engineer, which basically means software engineering and electrical engineering hybrid. So a huge part of what I was doing when I was studying and entering into what became my long career in IT thus far was software engineering. I was writing code with a bunch of different, at the time for sure, much more boring languages than we have access to now, but I was learning the theory. I was better understanding how to differentiate between good code and bad code and all kinds of stuff. And over my career, I've written over 100,000 lines of code across, I don't even know, countless programming languages at this point. Now, because I've had such a long career in software engineering myself, something else that I want to share with you is that quite a bit of code written by humans qualifies as slop too. If you've been in software engineering as long as I have and never gone back to look at what your code looked like years ago, you were probably pretty surprised by how bad it was. Now, that's okay because we were learning along the way. But the way it used to be done is we would Google things to try to solve problems and copy and paste code from Stack Overflow. And a lot of us, myself included, were just adding to tech debt that at some point was certainly going to need to be refactored. And that's just what it was like to managing teams of people writing code. It was very hard to maintain quality and standards. Now, I think AI has the potential, again, in the right hands and using it the right way to actually help us combat a lot of these problems, maintain greater consistency, and then as the technology itself continuously improves, it can be used to refactor to make sure that our code bases are of higher quality, and it can likely do that significantly faster than we ever could by hand. Here's the common pattern that I've seen folks follow who have either resisted or outright rejected the technology. Years ago, when AI was brought to market, they tested what was available at the time, had a bad experience because the quality was poor, rage quit, and then said, never again, this is all garbage. And that is a critical error. Here's why that was such a mistake. Now, when these tools were first available, they were essentially largely just a fancy autocomplete. But since then, we've seen model after model make exponential improvement to their capabilities, which has changed the game dramatically and led to those case studies that I shared with you earlier. And now with Opus 4.6, now Sonnet 4.6, and the ability to have 1 million context windows and all these types of things, the dramatic improvements are significant to the extent where if you are leveraging these technologies, your productivity has increased exponentially. This is akin to thinking about, Tesla or various self-driving car technology that was available over a decade ago. If you had just kind of taken it for what it was capable of then, you would have missed out on all the improvements and progress that it's made since then. I think it's the perfect time in this video for me to start taking shots at my favorite target, and that is vibe coding. We don't do vibe coding. We do context engineering and agentic engineering, and there's a reason for that. And more than likely, folks out there that have been resisting or rejecting these technologies were probably vibe coding, right? And I don't disagree. If you are going to try to vibe code with these technologies, it is going to produce slop, stuff that is unusable. That's why you need to use this technology the right way. Here's why context engineering compared with vibe coding produces significantly better results. When we're leveraging AI for software development, basically what we're doing is we're taking the best of both worlds. We're taking those best practices that practitioners like me and you used to leverage before we had access to the technology, and we're combining it with what the AI is capable of in order to help speed up the process and produce better results, right? Clear context, clear requirements, better acceptance criteria, thorough testing, better evaluating what changes the AI is making to your code base. That is context engineering. That is not vibe coding. Now, what I'm saying here is not that you can't do vibe coding every now and then, but I would reserve it for very specific use cases, like testing what a new model is capable of with less and less context. Will that help us push the needle a little bit further in terms of our level of productivity and how much we need to handhold the technology? Use vibe coding for just that. Don't use it for serious projects. Do context engineering instead. I need to share with you another uncomfortable truth, especially for my engineers out there, and that is most companies really don't care how you write your code. They don't care if it was written by a human or it was done by AI. What matters to them is how quickly can you be productive in shipping new features that provide value for the customers and make the product experience better. That's what matters more than anything. So the engineers that are embracing this technology and are capable of being 5 to 10 times faster with producing those features and providing all that value, the companies are definitely taking note of that. So if companies don't care about that, what do they care about? Well, what matters now more than anything is to figure out where those bottlenecks are in the process, eliminate them, and then produce better results faster. So what's really important is making sure that we figure out how to make our product experiences better. How do we make it more delightful for our users? How do we drive more growth? How does that translate into more revenue, right? More of these strategic elements as opposed to spending the vast majority of your time writing perfect code, which again, for the most part, companies and leaders don't really care about all that much anyway. What they do care about is how quickly can you produce valuable results. And if you lean into this technology, you're going to be able to do that. If you've been working on software anywhere near as long as I have, hopefully it hasn't been that long for you, you'll know that there is an adoption lifecycle curve to any new technology that comes to market. So let's take a look at where we are here with agentic coding and context engineering. Here's where I think we are relative to the technology adoption lifecycle curve for using AI to build software. Now, the innovators in the process, that's people like Boris at Anthropic, the engineering team at Spotify. They've been doing this stuff for months and producing pretty great results thus far. The early adopters, that's people like me and the founders of my community. We've been building real products with these tools and seeing massive results. The early majority, that's what's about to happen. So when Spotify announces it on its earnings call, when Microsoft's AI CEO says that we've got 12 to 18 months before we see significant disruption, and that, as we talked about, kind of like the vibe coding passe, that's the early majority starting to really listen and take this stuff seriously. Now, the laggards in the process, those are any engineers who basically tried this technology years ago, had some bad initial results, and then have resisted the technology ever since then, which is not a category you want to be in. Here's the thing about the adoption curve. It always finds an equilibrium. Agentic coding isn't going to replace all software engineering overnight, but it is going to become the default way professional software gets built. Just like version control did, just like CI/CD did, just like cloud deployment did. There's countless examples of this kind of stuff. So the question isn't if this reaches equilibrium, it's whether you're positioned on the right side of it when it does. I want to talk about what this means for my bootstrappers out there. Now, if you have a technical background, you've got a pretty significant head start here. All you got to do is leverage the technology to move faster than ever before. And if you're non-technical, AI is now going to enable you to close the gap to the extent where you probably really don't need a technical co-founder anymore. Each of those two categories of people and everyone in between, you are capable of building a successful SaaS business all by yourself, empowered by this technology. All you have to do is learn it, adopt it, and then get better with it over time. The speed and the productivity you're going to be capable of is going to be ridiculous. And for those out there that need to learn this anyway, you might as well come up with a couple of different use cases of figuring out what type of products might you be able to build. How valuable are those for various target markets? Can that generate some income for you, which could be anything from a side hustle to potentially replacing your full-time earned income? And now you've got your own business and you're off and running. Let's talk about the possible outcomes for leveraging this technology to try to build a bootstrap SaaS product business for yourself. Number one, if it doesn't go well, right? Worst case scenario, you have learned the technology that is now more valuable than ever, so you are going to be that much more attractive to the companies that you're going to want to work for, and you can roll those lessons learned into another attempt at building a bootstrap SaaS business as well too. Trust me, if I had stopped at my first failed bootstrap SaaS business, I wouldn't have gone anywhere or been anywhere near as successful as I am now. And I still have challenges from time to time. That's just part of the process. I roll those lessons learned forward, and that leads to greater and better successes in the future. Now, on the other hand, if your bootstrap SaaS business starts to take off, that could be a really great way to bring in some additional income, or maybe even replace your full-time income so that now you're basically a bootstrap SaaS founder just like me. That's a pretty decent win-win scenario, I would say, which got pretty low risk on the downside and pretty dramatic opportunity on the upside. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I hope you got value out of it, and I'd love to hear from you as well. So if you're a software engineer and you've been leveraging AI or you haven't for various reasons, please share what your experience has been like and why, because I can use that to produce different content in the future. And then for anybody out there who wants to build a bootstrap SaaS business, now's a better time than any, right? So join my community at bootstrappersparadise.com. Check out the links below where I'm providing a ton of value. And I also offer private coaching for anybody who wants to take advantage of that as well. And for my technical founders, I'm helping you layer on those business strategies and everything that you need to do in order to turn, everything that you can build, which is probably pretty significant, into a successful business. And then for my non-technical folks, I'm helping you understand how to connect that business strategy to leveraging AI and these various technologies to bring your concept to life. What I'll leave you with from this video is that not only is AI here to stay when it comes to creating software, but is producing more value for a ton of companies than ever before. It's going to reach a form of equilibrium, but the only thing that really matters is who's going to adopt it and do great things with it and who's going to be disrupted by it.